Let me commend the Alumni Association, the Board of Trustees and Management of Babcock University, who have shaped this wonderful alumni. I've interacted with a number of you, and so therefore, I know what great people that you are. The topic today, you've asked me to present my thoughts on the world today, the world tomorrow, in the technology space. It's expansive. We won't be able to do justice to focus for today. It's for us all to network and get to know one another again and find old friends. But just so I understand my audience, let me ask, how many of you today are wearing Fitbits, wearables, smart wearables? Anybody? Hands up, please, if you're wearing any Fitbits or if you use Fitbits. Well, the truth of the matter is, our world today has changed. I have 2 tips for you. Make sure you do a lot of dancing when the dancing comes up, because you'll hit your daily target of 10,000 steps. And again, with the Fitbit, I find that increasingly, it's an icebreaker. It's a great chat-up line for when boy meets girl. So that's my dating tip for you. What's our context? I think we're all agreed that the world we live in today is rapidly changing. New ideas, new economic models. Where do we start from? A great thing that very many wise people have said is to know where you're going, look to where you're coming from. I find that the rear view mirror is just as useful when driving, to see what's coming behind as the windscreen that you look through to see what's ahead. So let's use the rear view mirror. If you start from evolution of man and the world as we know it, so you had man who was the early gatherer, hunter, forager. He then moved to becoming a farmer. And the minute he was able to do that, to store seeds, to use tools, there was a tectonic shift in the world. Because it freed him up to begin to do other things. It freed him up to become the thinking man. So he's moved from preoccupying himself with gathering intangible assets to what we have today, which is the knowledge economy, which is around intangible assets. Milestones are therefore very important. So observing trends is one of the things I'd like for us to focus on tonight. If you observe the trends over time, you'll see where we're coming from and hopefully use that to know where we're going to. Trends have been with us from the beginning, and for those who can trend spot, you will own tomorrow. But let's use a shorter time frame. Let's not use early man. Let's use, in the last 50 years, in our time in this room, some of us, 1968 to today, 2018 is 50 years. I think that's a great time span for us to use. But we've witnessed very many changes, similar changes. Let's look through that rearview mirror. Who remembers that big fat box that used to be in offices, the fax machine? Where is it today? What about the answering machine? Remember back in the day? What's happening to pen friends? We're talking here about friendships. And there was a time when you had a pen friend. You would write to your pen friend on the other side of the world, and it would take a while for the post to go. Pen friends, the concept is gone. Today, our world is so much smaller, it's shrunk. Virtually no one has a home phone any longer. Remember that landline that you do like that with? Yes. Now we simply use the mobile phones. We also interact completely differently. I don't need to ring up my sister, for example. I find I don't need to ring her up every few minutes to tell her what's going on. We're on a few chat groups together, a few WhatsApp groups together. I can see what she's doing. I can see what she's wearing. Last week I was out of the country. I knew every Owambe she went to. I knew every party she went to. I was able to criticize what she wore. So 50 years ago, the notion that you could have a small device in your hand that would do everything for you, would do your grocery shopping for you, would play music, would track your movement. All of that, at the time, if you had said would happen, we would all have thought you deserve to be in a sanatorium. So our world has changed, and it's still changing fast. What about dating? The rules of dating have changed. I mean, some tell me that in the past, if you were asked out on a date, you could say yes or no. But today, somebody says to me, fam, all you have to do to curve someone is simply swipe left. Who understands what that means in this room? Simply swipe left. The younger ones will do so. With Instagram and followerships, anyone can become a celebrity. Take that picture, post it. If it's something great, you become a celebrity or an influencer. You wouldn't be judged as narcissistic if you're seen taking pictures of yourself. Back in the day, my mother would tell you, Well, you like joke, mama will me rush all the time. For those of you who understand it, there's nothing wrong now in holding up a phone and taking pictures of yourself. It didn't used to be like that. What about working? Working always used to be in an office. You had to be going to the office. In today's world and in tomorrow's world, I don't think you need to go to an office to work. Exercise is not just for those people who are fitness fanatics. Now everybody's exercising. Streaming, on demand. Before, I would wait to record a movie and then watch it in good time. Now it's on demand. I can watch it at any given time because streaming is part of the disruption that technology has brought. Digital cameras, I remember when digital cameras ate Kodak for lunch. Kodak, the company, almost went under because they did not adapt on time to the concept of digital cameras. So that's the life we're living in now. That's what today's world is showing us. So what's the moral of the story? What I'm saying to you today in this room is spot the trend, connect the dots, fill the gaps, because therein lies opportunity. These tectonic shifts that we're seeing, we see across all sectors. Education, health, employment, trade, commerce, transportation. But the paradigm shifts are not just within the sectors. The paradigm shifts also go into concepts. So we're seeing shifts in terms of religion, romance, gender. I was in a debate with my children earlier on this year. They were talking about gender. And I said, well, what's all this about gender? For me, it's male, female. And they educated me there are about 6 or 8 other gender types. Pangender, transgender, bigender, binary gender. What is all of that? But that's the world we're living today. And the interesting thing is, in this debate, and I think I have very well-rounded children, and they had their friends there. The difference, though, was during this debate, I realized that we need to change our mindset to accommodate some of the thinking that they have today. They saw nothing wrong with pansgender. I remember saying, what is a pangender? And they said to me, it's non-binary. It is somebody who doesn't see himself as male or female. And they genuinely felt that that was okay. I don't agree with it. We're still talking about that at home. Let's look at the pace of change. So we agree, change is here. But I think a bigger thing that we need to look at is the pace of change. Progress moving quicker as time goes on is what some call human history's law of accelerating returns. Why is change always faster? We agree that the change in our world today is driven by technology, is far more rapid than ever before. But I think what we also must pay attention to is the fact that the pace of change itself has changed. And it's not just to listen to these things, it's to therefore say, well, what do I need to do? How do I need to change to make sure that I'm ready for this change? The pace of change has changed. Humanity made more advances in the 19th century than in the 15th. Advances will be exponential going forward. So what that means is that we no longer have the luxury of saying, do I want to adopt? Do I want to adapt? You need to make that decision really quickly. Beyond that, the quantum of the change is the second thing I want us to look at. So the pace was one thing. The quantum is another thing. It's not small. It's not incremental. It's not the small, imperceptible changes. But our experiences, our imagination limits us. If I told you that in your lifetime you may live to be 150, what will your mind tell you? Because your experiences say otherwise, your mind will probably tell you, no, not today, maybe sometime in the future. Please hold that thought, because I will come back to this later on. I'm convinced that we need to think about these things now. So this accelerated evolution, what must we do? One thing it must do, and it must do from today, is it must give rise to the much needed discuss, the debates. We need to ask ourselves, and we need to ask now, how do we define humanity? Because technology without humanity will not be the sort of technology that makes life worth living. So how do we define humanity? What do we value? These are things we need to start thinking about now. We cannot be merely observers. A lot of the change that we see is coming from outside of the shores of this country, of this continent. All the more reason why we mustn't be just mere observers. We must be participants and lend our voices to the issues that will shape these changes that will impact us all. It will come to us. It's not a runaway train yet, but it's a high-speed train and it is coming. I think we're at a juncture where more than ever before, we need to unshackle our minds. The biggest thing we must do now is honestly open your minds. I said to myself, with that debate around gender, much as my religion and everything else said to me, what are they talking about? You must resist this. I went away and I went to think about it. That the first thing I need to do for myself is actually unshackle my mind, prepare to embrace more. But more importantly is find the courage, not just to embrace, but to lead the charge. Courage is the one thing I want to say we must all have and we must all take away, because to him who dares, the future. So we must find that courage to decide that we must dare, and we must dare to do much more than our environment perhaps permits us to do. We must as leaders be the architects of our own fortune and be part of that conversation. Because the scope of this topic is so wide, I decided let's limit it to just 3 areas. Let's focus on those things, those broad themes facing humanity today as a whole. So the themes I picked were population expansion and growth. So that's theme number 1. And in light of that, think about the natural resources and what the future holds as a result of that for us. Theme number 2, think about privacy and data as a subset of that. Data is a thing. It's going to become the next biggest thing if it isn't already. And theme number 3 is around robotics, autonomous technology, all the AI, machine learning, Internet of Things. That's going to be the big one. So those 3 things. Let's start with population growth. Is it good or bad, this population explosion? What are your thoughts on it? Have you even given it any thought? I really ask you in this room, if you haven't given some of these notions thought, give it thought. Because it impacts you and it impacts your future generation. So is population growth good or bad? If you think about it, population has doubled in my lifetime. In 1968, we were, 3.5 billion globally? 2018, which is 50 years, we're 7.6 billion. And projected that in 2050, we will be 10 billion. 10 billion people on this earth sharing the same resource. Africa is even worse. Because in 1968, we're only 350 million. In 2018, 1.2 billion. Let's look at that same projection of 2050. You're looking at 2.4 billion. But the question we must ask ourselves, will we be that 2.4 billion of the world's poorest? Well, that's what we've been told we're going to be. And it's those of us in this room, those of you in this room who will make that change. We cannot be 2.4 billion and the world's poorest coming out of Africa. We will soon begin to eat one another if that's the case. So I think the premise here is that technology must serve its greatest good in tackling the challenges of population growth. Around the areas of security, if you have a population expansion, we know what will happen around security, around health, around education. How do you use technology today to address some of those issues? I said I would talk about population growth in light of natural resources. Our natural resources are challenged. It's not infinite. The resources on this planet are not infinite. Water is our scarcest resource at the moment. Water. We already have conflicts in places like Yemen. Yemen talks about 4,000 people, I think, a month dying to conflicts based on water. What are these conflicts? Wells. What do we think is happening with Lake Chad drying up? And we can see some of the issues we have in that region. These things are real, and it's here now. Our world tomorrow will face conflicts based on natural resources. How do we therefore make sure that technology is there to support us and solve some of those problems of consumption and usage? It's tied to population growth in that sense. We must reduce that inequality gap. It's the biggest thing that we must do. We must look at the need for increased welfarism. If our young ones are rushing through Libya and the Mediterranean to go in search of greener pastures, it's not a surprise that with the population growth, we will see the massive migration to mega cities, and that's what's happening. For those of you in this room who are already on a fast-track trajectory to an amazing career, I want to leave you with one thing. Watch that inequality gap. Mind that gap. Because what we're seeing now is there's an increasing challenge to executive fat cat paychecks. If you want to enjoy your success in peace and in security, believe you me, mind that equality gap and start minding it today. We must tap into solar. Solar is the largest source of energy. Food shortages must be a thing of the past, using technology and the revolution in crop production through, light technology, LEDs, and so on. We must reduce wastage. We must eliminate diseases in crops. But beyond all of that is this concept that our mindset must change, our thinking must change for the future of tomorrow that we will live in. We must consider alternative sources of food. Ants for protein is the next biggest thing coming out of the West. So they're looking at insects as a protein source. Insect burgers instead of cattle burgers. They don't require the space that cattle do. They don't eat as much food. They're easier to farm. It's a quicker cycle and turnaround, and you can do it in a little room and have thousands of insects that you grow and you farm. And most importantly, you will not have herdsmen clashes, as we seem to have here in Nigeria. But my question to you in this room is, why are we waiting for the West to do that? Why can't we leapfrog and be the one coming up with such concepts? After all, back in the day, I believe we ate crickets. Crickets are the most proteinous insect ever. And we have that. Now we're going to wait for the West to create the insect burgers. And guess what they will do? They will sell it as a quicker solution to famine in the areas in Africa where you have famine. So remember, I had 3 concepts. So the first one was population growth expansion tied to natural resources. Natural resources will be a big issue going forward. My second one is privacy. And this is a bit, for me, that gets really interesting. Depends on which side of the fence you're on. Privacy, what is that? Do we still have privacy? We're looking at data as a subset of that. We've said data is new gold to be mined. No longer are people going for the gold rush in California. It's your data that they're going for. So the premise is that privacy cannot exist in a fully connected world. If you're truly fully connected, the notions of privacy must be thrown out of the window. One of the futurists, Richard Thiem, he says, your privacy is gone. You just don't know it yet. It's a great article. If you ever come across it, please read it. He says, at the heart of the internet culture is a force that wants to know everything about you. We still think of privacy as a human right. They're saying it no longer is. So let's move on. Privacy is gone. Your personal space is gone. Look, the truth is, much of the data, our data footprint that's out there, we give unconscious. We're not conscious about the fact that we're giving it. It's unintended. But the reality is, it presents potential landmines for the future. We need to start thinking about that. So that innocuous data that you've given is aggregated, is analyzed, and used to come up with all sorts of different information about you that's quite frightening, to be honest. I believe that you need to think about where data is going in terms of the top 10 most profitable brands globally. Who are the top 10 brands today in 2018? They're all data companies. So I have a list of them here. You have Amazon at the top, Apple, Google, Samsung, Facebook, AT&T, Microsoft, Verizon, and then number 9 is Walmart, number 10 is the bank ICBC. It used to be that the bankers were the fat cats. The bankers were the ones we had to be worried about. They were the horrible people doing what not to our countries. Well, interestingly, 3, 4, 5 years ago, a lot of the companies on here would not have made the top 10. They are the top 10. And it's your data that they are using to become the top 10. Another concept is the fact that the world is becoming smaller. We've always said, the world is a global village. Transport enabled the world to shrink at the last era shift. Today, it's data, and the access to data, our interconnectivity, is making the world smaller. It has market implications, positive or negative, for those of you in commerce amongst us. Because no longer can you think, I've created my own market in Nigeria. Well, once you've done that, because China has access to your data in Nigeria here, they can create better products, better targeted, better suited to me, and I would choose to purchase those. So be mindful that we're in a better and connected world. And as a result of that, data and attention to data is what's going to rule tomorrow. Some data that I think you should look at, there's a company called Domo. Data never sleeps. They always release information about data. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data daily as of June 2018 is what we produce. 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years. 2 years. Remember what I said earlier on about the pace of change. Connected cars, which is coming, don't doubt it. send 25 gigabytes of data to the cloud every hour. That's like sending 3 of the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy to the cloud every hour. So that's the sort of data that we're generating. Today, 10 billion devices are connected to the internet. By 2020, which is what, in 2 years' time, we're looking at 50 billion devices connected to the internet. Where are we in all of that? Where's Nigeria in all of that? And I want to ask yourself, where am I in all of that? What conscious thoughts do I have about my data footprint or how I use data footprint? An anecdote I read the other day was that the innocent release of London bicycle hire data, you know those bicycles they have around that people can ride? Well, it made it possible for the public to view individual customer trips, and they knew when people were late to work or when they slept somewhere other than their home. That was an accidental release of data that people could then put together, analyze, and come up with all this information. From publicly accessible data, privacy is questionable. Let me move on very quickly. Simple things like, for those of us in that space in this room, what we know is if you're a business leader, you will need data scientists. The sorts of jobs and the careers for the future are changing and changing right before our very eyes. I remember when the GDPR policy was going to come in, it's a European Union law around data privacy. Between when it launched in May 2018 and today, there are over 20,000 job descriptions on LinkedIn that have GDPR in it. How are you updating your skill sets and the skill sets of your teams or of the companies that you own or you work for? But the notion of not giving out your data freely is one that's coming up. There's a cafe in Boston called Shiru Cafe. They give free drinks to students for providing their data. They figure that if you're giving your data, you might as well get something back. So you can't walk into Shiru and pay money for coffee. No, it's your data they want, and you get a drink. Let me move on to the third area that I just thought we should address. The robotics, autonomous technology, AI, Internet of Things. It's here. Let no one think it's not here. It's here, it's all around us, and although it's not dangerous, well, at least not yet. What about your ride-sharing apps? Uber and Taxify, they work on artificial intelligence. Internet radio, so Spotify, for example, where you can stream the music you want to listen to, powered by AI. They've recruited the world's leading expert in the field of machine intelligence, such that through your preferences, they can now design music specifically for you, all by AI. I mean, it goes on and on. But the one thing I want to leave you with is that artificial narrow intelligence, which we already have today, which we enjoy today, which helps our world today, is the precursor of the world-altering tsunami that's on the way. Each new ANI that we add as innovation, it quietly adds another brick onto the road of AGI and ASI. So with the signposts, again, remember earlier on we looked through the rearview mirror, we saw some things that had gone obsolete. Let's do that again. Let's make some assumptions around some of the devices and things that will become obsolete even in our own time now. So devices that have singular use. How many of us still use standalone calculators? Devices like that will be thrown out the window. Alarm clocks on its own. It's single user devices are out the window. Devices with cords. Again, we're all going wireless. I wear this around me because that's what I do. I don't, cordless. Paper. Will paper be gone? That might be a good thing. Textbooks, because we're all going on e-learning now. Hard drives. Who remembers hard drives? Time was when you'd buy a really big, chunky hard drive for all your data. With cloud computing, you don't need hard drives. Cloud storage, you don't need hard drives. A simple one, car keys. A number of cars now don't have keys. You just go in the car, you just press the button, and all that when you're leaving the house. I'm always doing this, looking for where did I leave my key? It's gone out the window. No more car keys. Buttons on phones, remote controls. We've got voice recognition now. So if software will perform all those routine jobs, some jobs will disappear, and entirely new jobs will have to be created. That is our job whilst we're here, whilst we're in this room, to think about the new jobs that need to be created, to think about the new careers. Universities need to start thinking about what course of study, what line of curriculum needs to prepare us for the world tomorrow. It's digital everywhere. Wireless, wearable chips, chip embedding. We will have chips embedded in us. I can go on and on. My premise, however, in speaking to all of you today is that in the room today we have business leaders, perhaps we have civil leaders, and perhaps we have defense leaders. Wear any of those caps. Anytime in your career, you might actually end up wearing any of those caps. Let me define what I mean by a civil leader. Anybody in politics, anybody involved in government, civil servants, you're all civil leaders. Defense leaders, anybody in security. Wear whichever cap fits you. So in the 70s, the ATM was a revolution. Today, you now have app banking. You have USSD banking. We're rolling out chat banking so that using your WhatsApp, you use it to chat bank. It presents opportunities for the new millionaires in this room. As business leaders, the future needs you to build sustainable, flexible companies. Those of you who will be in HR, I want you to think about it. What sort of talent would you be looking for? Are you looking for human talent or talent augmented by software, augmented by AI? You would need to think about that. The private sector must concern itself with the opportunities that this population expansion, we said 3 billion new consumers by 2050, largely in emerging markets, of which Nigeria is one. So the discourse on privacy, the erosion of privacy, and so on, much as we have that in play, but 3 billion new people, that's a great new market that opens up for us that we can tap into. If we continue to do what we've always done, we will get what we've always got. So those companies, those industries that have the edge today because they have patents and maybe optimized supply chains and so on, need to begin to think so they don't end up like Kodak. You need to make sure that we're not complacent. And as business leaders in the room, as leaders in the room, in the companies you work in, these are the concepts and the notions you need to take back. Do we have civil leaders in the room today? What are the concerns? Again, we talked about the job creation, viable solutions to economic migration. If robots are to take over the more physical jobs, so the assembly line, Ford's assembly line, used to be men lining up to put the cars together. Now, robotic arms are doing that. Well, what are the new jobs that you need to create? Because if you don't create jobs, you will have economic unrest and civil unrest. And for the defense leaders, this is an interesting one. And remember what I said earlier on about the signposts are there already. You just need to look out for them. Combat robots are here. Currently, unmanned combat is the way America is going. It saves them a lot of money. Arguably, the robots will help reduce the cost of, the armed combat. But the question to ask ourselves is, will this spur us to war even quicker? If it is cheaper, well, why not do it? And let me tie that back into what I said to you earlier on about the fight for natural resources. If we're fighting for natural resources, it's easier to go to war for all of that. As I begin to summarize, let me tell you two things that really excite me, two of the things that I see coming. Who's heard of 3D printing? 3D printing or additive manufacturing? Can I just check? Sense check in the room. Who's heard of 3D printing? 3D printing? I think we have less than a 20% hands up. It's either that or we're not really here. What I would suggest is to the 80% who have not heard of 3D printing, please look into it. Or, just additive manufacturing generally. It's transforming how we build products. So basically you will design, download your product design, send them to the 3D printer in our homes and offices, and you access your goods instantly. I'm certainly already on the queue for 3D printing technology as part of my walking wardrobe because guess what? I never have to buy. I will just design my shoes and I will print it. Nike is doing that already. You can actually print your Nike design shoes. So what will 3D do for us? 3D will impact on logistics. So the shipping companies, for example, shipping from China to all parts of the world, with 3D, all of that will be reduced. No trailers on Apapa Bridge. So those of you in the haulage business, think about it. Trailers and transportation from the ports to the markets will probably be gone with 3D printing. 3D may well have the single largest impact of our time on natural resources based on raw materials that we've talked about earlier on. But the one thing as an emerging economy you must remember is that 3D is not so great for us. Because what's great for us is to be able to produce and export. That's part of how emerging nations like ourselves build themselves out of the economic doldrums that we're in. So bear that in mind, because we no longer will have that opportunity. And again, there's another negative impact around the adjacent jobs that will be lost. I talked about haulage, shipping, and so on. But let's take another leap forward. So 3D is my one thing that I want to leave you with today. 3D is the future. Get on board with 3D if you haven't. But let's take another leap forward and ask ourselves, do we think that we will ever get to the realm of embedded technology, embedded chips, and so on? I believe we will in our lifetime. I'm not saying it will happen after I am dead. BCI, which is brain-computer interface, which could allow our thoughts carry out functions, eliminating the need, for example, for typing. As I think it, I do it. BCI will be embedded within human functionality within our lifetime. Take it from me. So, imagine the issues that we will have with that. Brain-computer interface, which allows you blink and you can do certain things. Will there be a defense? I mean, are there lawyers in the room? Tell me, will there be a defense in law, criminal law, for actions carried out by defective or hacked embedded software? Interesting. To my mind, remember, we went from not wanting to push buttons on telephones, we wanted to just swipe. That instant gratification. So we've gone from button to buttonless, and now even fingerless. We don't want to type. I just want to think it and control whatever that action is. So I could sit in front of my TV, think it, and change the channels as I'm thinking. So what's the trend here? The trend is around quicker, faster, even more instant gratification. How do people who are in the tech industry, do the giants who make so much money out of tech do it? It is because they observe the trends and they provide solutions for those trends. So what is the trend here? Quicker, faster, even more instant gratification. Those who will make their money in improvements, that's a place to look, how to make things quicker and faster. BCI is not a one-way street. Picture it again, back to the lawyers. In law, I no longer need to memorize case law. I can flick through the library, indexing and cross-referencing in an instant. In medicine, I no longer need to memorize copious notes. It's all at my fingertips. As a banker, as you say hello to me, I can read your credit history. All I just do is blink and I can read your credit history before you complete your first sentence. I can make your dissertation script. I can mark your dissertation script, checking for plagiarism, literally with the blink of an eye. In the medical field, I can be in permanent health check mode. With every breath I take, I walk into a room and I decide, the toxic fumes here are too much, and I leave. I can be in health check mode with every step I take, because as I'm walking, my heartbeat rates, we have that already. With the Fitbit I'm wearing on my hand here, I can check everything. I'm sleeping and this Fitbit tells me how many times I turned in the night. It tells me how restless my sleep was. It tells me that every single day. It tells me when I've gotten enough rest and when I haven't. It tells me how many times I woke up without even me realizing that I woke up. So think about it. With BCI, I'm in permanent health check mode. I can check the food I'm eating. Immediately I eat it. If it's bad for me, there's a scan. There's a retina scan that tells me, oh, you need to adjust this or adjust that. It brings me to what I said earlier. We can live longer. Because if you're doing your health checks immediately, who knows? Perhaps you can live longer within our lifetime. Let me ask you, has this change been signaled? Has BCI been signaled? Remember what I said to you. Always look for the signals and the signposts in your lifetime. It has been signaled. In May 2015, researchers at Caltech implanted the neural chips that control the arm into the part of the brain responsible for the intent to move, enabling a paralyzed man drink a mug of beer for the first time unaided. If they can do that with a paralyzed man, all he had to do was look at the mug of beer. He had the intention in his mind to drink it, and it controlled his arm, and he was able to do that. What a great opportunity for the lawyers in the room. Again, we're not saying all of these things to make it scary or to just paint a picture of what the world looks like. That would be an exercise in futility. We're not here to just entertain ourselves based on that. We're here to say, what therefore are the opportunities and what are you doing about it? For the lawyers in the room, if you're bored where you are right now, maybe you're a junior at Chambers, well, start taking an interest in your own future. In your own time, begin to think about which way the law will go, because a lot of these things will need to be tested. If I have BCI embedded and I commit a crime, well, was that intentional or was it as a result of a hack of a software? Concepts will need to be tested. I believe that the augmented human, which is coming, is going to be the single largest disruption to our world as we know it. We can say with certainty that it's on the cards and it's going to happen. And given that human history of accelerating returns that I talked about, it will happen sooner rather than later. So we may live longer. What I say to the women, if indeed we're going to live longer, ladies, be careful who you choose to marry. Well, maybe not just the ladies. Seriously, you need to think about your choices if we're going to live longer. If technology is going to impact us in all of these different ways, there's so many things that we need to think about. Cell replication technology is here already. The ability, to erase diseases from our DNA. It means reunions like this in the future could have your grandchildren here with you. It also means that you can erase the tummies. We come to reunions and everybody wants to look good and see who else is looking good. Well, with cell replacement technology, you're there. So let me quickly wrap up. What am I trying to say here? That in our interconnected world, the world tomorrow will definitely change. That there will be debates around food, around resources, around what technology brings to us. That if you're in a space where your technology is going to be obsolete very soon, you need to start thinking about how you change your technology. Notions and concepts about what gender is and about what food is, notions and concepts about whether or not we can eat ants, like I said, will help answer the question and solve some of the problems around our natural resources and food shortage. I keep on saying there is no guidebook for the emerging tectonic shifts in our world. There's no guidebook. We're at the cusp of something that we don't know how far it will go. The one thing I will leave you with is, like I said, if man thinks it, man does it. So it is going to happen. The question for you, therefore, as future-focused leaders in this room, are you prepared? But you can never just be prepared. You need to be continuously preparing. And I think our universities all teach us that and tell us that. There's this Buddhist saying that resonates. If you want to know your past, look into your present conditions. If you want to know your future, look into your present actions. What are your present actions? Because it will determine your future. If we can live longer, don't abuse that body today, because you will end up with that body you don't want because you've abused it. If you're to adapt to our ever-changing world, free your imagination. Don't live in shackles. We know that our experiences shape us. Continuously fight your experiences that mold and shape your thinking so you can unshackle your mind. Learn how to spot trends is my third thing, so that you can remain nimble and agile. But you must look beyond the next horizon. It's not enough to look at what's happening today. The task is to look beyond the next horizon. Begin to build muscle, not of brawn. We saw early man was all about brawn, but of courage. Build muscle of courage, because those who dare will seize the world tomorrow. But those who care, and that's where humanity comes in, will make tomorrow meaningful. We ask that technology not just seize the world of tomorrow, but we ask that we make it caring technology, because that is what will make our world meaningful and worthwhile. Be curious and experiment more. Embrace differences. Access different worldview. Not just because we talk about diversity. Embracing differences here isn't about diversity. It is so that you can have different worldviews and you can be richer for it. Finally, have a solutions mindset. A solutions mindset. Tackling the limiting orthodoxies. My final word for you tonight, as I say congratulations again for your reunion, is do not run through life so fast that you forget not only where you've been, but also where you're going. Thank you very much.
May I request you still stand? Distinguished guests, please can we stand for a round of applause to this presentation?